Good evening, and welcome. Tonight's critical question: is political corruption an inevitable stain on governance, or can it be systematically eliminated? This issue strikes at the core of public trust and societal progress. We have Professor Alistair Finch arguing for the potential eradication of corruption, and Ms. Cassandra Thorne, who contends it's an unavoidable aspect of political life. Each will offer opening statements, rebuttals, engage in a moderated discussion, and provide closing summaries. Our goal is a nuanced exploration. Let's begin.
Thank you, Dr. Hayes. My position is clear. Political corruption, while a persistent blight, is not an immutable feature of governance. It is a systemic issue that can be significantly curtailed, and with sustained effort, even eradicated in certain aspects. To accept its inevitability is to surrender to a debilitating cynicism. History shows societal structures evolve. So too can our approach to corruption. The foundation for its defeat lies in robust democratic institutions, an independent judiciary, a free press, and an engaged, vigilant citizenry. Consider nations like Singapore or those in Scandinavia. Their low corruption levels aren't accidental, but products of deliberate long-term strategies, strong legal frameworks, rigorous enforcement, and a culture intolerant of graft. Transparency in public finance, meritocratic civil services, and protection for whistleblowers are essential components of such strategies. While no system is perfect, and context matters, the principles of accountability and integrity are universally applicable. The fight is an ongoing process, not a singular event. It demands constant adaptation, technological leverage, and international cooperation to address its increasingly complex and transnational nature. It requires us to believe that change is possible. This is not about achieving an overnight utopia, but about a committed, incremental journey towards cleaner governance, which demonstrably enhances justice, equality, and national development. The evidence supports that such a journey is feasible.
Professor Finch's optimism is commendable, but I must ground us in a more sobering reality. While mitigating corruption is a worthy goal, its complete elimination is, I contend, a utopian aspiration, fundamentally at odds with human nature and the enduring dynamics of power. Power, as history pervasively demonstrates, has a corrupting influence. Wherever authority and control over resources reside, opportunities for illicit enrichment and abuse of office will invariably emerge. This isn't cynicism, it's an observation of a persistent pattern. Look across cultures, political systems, and epochs. Corruption is ubiquitous. It adapts, it persists. From fledgling democracies to established states, its tendrils are found. This isn't to say all corruption is equal, but its presence is a constant. The psychological and sociological drivers are potent: greed, ambition, cronyism, the pressures of political survival. These are not easily engineered out of the human experience or political competition. Systems can be improved, but they will always be managed by imperfect beings. Therefore, our focus should be less on the elusive goal of, quote, elimination, and more on pragmatic containment and management. This means building resilient systems that can function effectively, even with a baseline level of corruption, limiting its capacity to cause systemic damage. It means prioritizing robust transparency and accountability, not as tools for eradication, but as vital mechanisms for exposure, deterrence, and ensuring that corruption's worst excesses are curbed. We must manage the inevitable, not chase the impossible.
Ms. Thorne's emphasis on human fallibility is a fair point, but it shouldn't lead to resignation. Human beings are also capable of creating and adhering to ethical frameworks, especially when incentivized, and supported by well-designed systems. The argument that corruption is ubiquitous overlooks the vast and nude differences asterisk in its prevalence and impact. The Corruption Perception Index clearly shows that some nations have achieved remarkably low levels. This variance demonstrates that corruption is not a fixed constant, but a variable that can be influenced. If it were truly an unchangeable facet of human endeavor, we wouldn't see such disparities. These successes, even if imperfect, prove that systemic interventions, strong rule of law, transparency, accountability, genuinely work to suppress corrupt practices. Therefore, striving for significant curtailment, aiming to make corruption a marginal rather than a defining feature of public life, is both a realistic and an essential goal. To concede its inevitability at a high level is to accept a lower standard of governance than citizens deserve.
Professor Finch rightly points to variance, but even in so-called successful countries, corruption often simply morphs into more subtle, sophisticated guises, perhaps through opaque lobbying, corporate influence, or revolving door politics. Absolute purity is an illusion. Furthermore, the specific socio-cultural factors or advantageous geopolitical positions of some low-corruption nations are not easily replicated elsewhere. What works in a small, homogeneous society may not scale or translate to a large, diverse, or historically burdened one. My core argument remains the adaptability of corrupt actors. For every new safeguard, determined individuals and networks will seek and find vulnerabilities. It's a perpetual game of cat and mouse, and the mouse is often highly motivated and resourceful. The structures of power, resource allocation, and human ambition will always generate pressure points. While we must diligently strive to reinforce defenses, believing we can eliminate all breaches is to underestimate the persistence of these fundamental forces.
Professor Finch, Ms. Thorne underscores the adaptability of corrupt actors. How can anti-corruption frameworks stay ahead, remaining dynamic, rather than merely reactive to evolving tactics?
By fostering a culture of proactive integrity, Dr. Hayes. This involves leveraging technology like AI for predictive analysis, ensuring robust whistleblower protections, and crucially, promoting international collaboration to track and counter transnational corruption. Agility and intelligence sharing are key.
A brief counter. Technology can also be exploited for more sophisticated corruption, and international cooperation often hits the wall of national interest. These are tools, not panaceas.
Ms. Thorne, if we accept that significant corruption is inevitable, doesn't this risk breeding public cynicism and disengagement? Why should citizens or reformers strive if the fight is fundamentally unwinnable?
The incentive shifts from elimination to quote-quote harm reduction and accountability. The fight is to ensure corruption doesn't cripple the state or erode all public trust. It's about maintaining functionality and transparency, keeping the beast caged, even if it can't be slain.
But caging the beast still requires immense effort, and the public needs to believe the fight is for more than just containment. Hope for genuine improvement, however incremental, is a powerful motivator for collective action.
Considering emerging technologies like blockchain or advanced AI, do these offer more hope for combating corruption? Or do they introduce new, complex vulnerabilities?
They offer significant potential. Blockchain can enhance transparency in supply chains and asset registries. AI can detect anomalies indicative of fraud far faster than humans. However, equitable access and robust oversight are vital to prevent new forms of exclusion or manipulation.
And they create new challenges. Sophisticated actors can use these same technologies to obscure illicit activities or create new forms of digital cronyism. The race to stay ahead simply moves to a new technological domain, with new gatekeepers and new risks.
To conclude, I maintain that political corruption is a conquerable challenge, not an inescapable destiny. It is a product of flawed systems and choices, and therefore amenable to systemic reforms and better choices. While the path is arduous, progress is demonstrably possible. Strong institutions, an independent judiciary, a free press, and an engaged citizenry are the cornerstones of this endeavor. These are not utopian dreams, but achievable goals. The fight against corruption is a moral imperative and a practical necessity for global development, justice, and stability. We must champion transparency, accountability, and ethical leadership with unwavering resolve. Let us not be cowed by the persistence of the problem, but inspired by the vision of a more just world. The effort to significantly reduce corruption is a defining struggle of our time, and one that we can and must advance.
My closing argument reaffirms a pragmatic stance. Human nature and the intrinsic dynamics of power create an enduring susceptibility to corruption. Acknowledging this is not defeatism, but realism. While we must vigorously pursue all reasonable measures to mitigate corruption, the expectation of its complete eradication is a chimera that can lead to misallocated resources and eventual disillusionment. Our focus should be on resilience. This means building systems that can withstand and manage a certain baseline of corrupt activity, prioritizing transparency to expose its worst forms, and ensuring accountability to limit its damage. The goal is a functional state, not an impossible ideal. Let us strive for better governance, robust checks and balances, and a vigilant public. But let us do so with a clear-eyed understanding of the limitations imposed by the human element and the persistent allure of power. Manage, mitigate, and maintain transparency.
My sincere thanks to Professor Finch and Ms. Thorne for this compelling and insightful exchange. You've adeptly framed the core tension, the ideal of an incorruptible state, versus the pragmatic acceptance of enduring human and systemic vulnerabilities. The debate over corruption's inevitability continues, but your contributions have greatly enriched our understanding. We encourage our audience to continue this vital conversation. Thank you for joining us.